Join our community by subscribing. Every click helps us share more stories like this one. Chapter 1. The Introduction. In the quiet town of Maplewood, nestled between rolling hills and dense woodlands, life moved at a pace untouched by the chaos of the outside world. This wasn't a typical pocket of Americano diners or bustling Main Street. Instead, it was a place where everyone knew their neighbors, and crime was little more than an abstract notion whispered about in stories. But on the morning of April 12, 2021, everything changed. The sun poured down through the branches. Birds chirped aimlessly in the distance, and the life was extinguished under the most ordinary of circumstances. Marjorie Calloway, a beloved schoolteacher known for her penchant for bright floral dresses and enthusiastic hugs, was found lifeless in her home. It was an unremarkable house on Oak Street, painted white with blue shutters, surrounded by a meticulously kept garden. For years, Marjorie had hosted community gatherings and served as a beacon of support for local children. Yet, as the first responders arrived, the facade of that nurturing space faded away, revealing a gruesome reality. Her body lay on the kitchen floor, an open book spread beside her, the pages stained with the remnants of her final moments. Neighbors gathered outside, faces pale with disbelief as police cordoned off the area with yellow tape. Speculation buzzed in the air, carried on whispers and furtive glances. Who could have done this to her? A figure of kindness, now a victim of something unthinkable. As investigators arrived, the sun rose higher, casting long shadows over the tight-knit community. They were about to uncover not just the whereabouts of Marjorie's killer, but hidden connections that wove a tapestry of secrets throughout Maplewood. Chapter 2. The Victim. Marjorie Calloway was more than just a teacher. She was a lifeline in the community of Maplewood. Every child knew her by name, her laughter ringing the playground as she darted between swings and slides, an embodiment of boundless energy and enthusiasm. For over a decade, she had spent her days igniting the spark of curiosity in young minds. Her classroom walls adorned with vibrant drawings and literary quotes that inspired generations. Her life wasn't without its challenges. Raised by a single mother after her father abandoned them when she was just 3, Marjorie learned early the importance of resilience. She often recounted how her mother instilled in her the belief that kindness mattered above all else. After graduating from college, Marjorie returned to Maplewood, not only to teach, but to give back to a community that had nurtured her. But behind her effervescent smile lay complexities that few knew. As investigators combed through her home, they stumbled upon her journal, filled with dreams of travel and adventure, but also peppered with darker entries. In one particularly unsettling passage, she wrote about her growing concerns over a shadowy figure she had spotted lurking near the local park, same park where she often hosted summer reading sessions for her students. A tight-knit network of friends and colleagues mourned deeply, yet nothing prepared them for the unearthing of deeper secrets. Who would want to harm a woman so devoted to her community? As the layers of Marjorie's life began to unfurl, detectives sensed they were standing at the precipice of a mystery far more complicated than initially anticipated. With each revelation, the bond between the unsuspected warmth of the town and the bitterness of its hidden darkness grew more palpable, suggesting that in Maplewood, nothing is ever as it seems. Chapter 3. The Crime Scene. The early spring air was thick with tension as investigators carefully stepped inside Marjorie Calloway's home. An unassuming structure that now bore the weight of its tragic narrative. The soft hum of police radios blended into an eerie symphony as a forensic team began their meticulous search. The scene was chaotic but eerily serene, with sunlight flooding in through the kitchen window, illuminating the remnants of a life abruptly halted. Marjorie lay sprawled on the cold tile floor, one hand clutching her beloved copy of Pride and Prejudice, the other resting near a scattering of vibrant wildflowers she had picked just days before. It was a cruel juxtaposition, beauty and horror entwined beneath the same roof. A medical examiner knelt beside her, his face a mask of concentration as he assessed the evidence. The initial observations were grim. Signs of struggle were apparent: an overturned chair, a broken plate on the floor, and dark smudges leading from the back door into the living area. Bone-deep scratches marred the countertops, hinting at frantic movement. Not far from the body, a vase had shattered, its shards glinting like tiny daggers against the starkness of the kitchen. As they surveyed the room, a sharp-eyed detective noticed a fresh print on the door handle, evidence that someone had entered the home without force. Perhaps it was someone Marjorie had known. As suspicion thickened, the implications gnawed at the edges of the investigators' minds. Could this have been a calculated crime or a moment born out of an unexpected confrontation? The team collected evidence, cataloging each item with precision. Marjorie's blood lay pooled in a pattern, a macabre artwork that told the story of a violent act. It was vital to reconstruct the scene, to understand the last moments of a woman who had given so much to others. As the forensic lights flickered over the stark reality of the crime, the darkness that had invaded Maplewood began to seep into the hearts of those who had once felt its safety. No one was safe. The monster was among them. Chapter 4. The Early Investigation. As dusk settled over Maplewood, the frantic buzz of activity transitioned into a quieter, more solemn atmosphere. Detectives Richards and Morgan convened outside the crime scene, their faces stained with a blend of weariness and determination. The small stretch of Oak Street felt different. It was no longer just a road now, it served as a grim reminder of a community shrouded in fear. The detectives convened a meeting at the local precinct to dissect their initial findings. Coffee cups exchanged hands as they pored over the evidence, keenly aware that each detail could be the key to unraveling the enigma of Marjorie's death. They reviewed witness statements, neighbors who had heard shouting, a couple who described a shadowy figure seen near the property the night before. "Look," Richard said, sifting through the witness reports. "The timeline is key. We've got a window between when Marjorie left the school close to 5 and when the neighbors heard the commotion around just after 8. Morgan nodded, flipping through the pages. "What about that figure? We need to focus on. Several people saw the same person near the park. Someone knows something." By sunrise, the investigators had formed a plan. They would canvass the area around the park, speak to anyone who had been nearby that day, and distribute flyers, anything to identify the mystery figure. They knew that tight-knit communities often share not just secrets, but whispers that could break a case wide open. Meanwhile, in the town, a palpable unrest mingled with the morning sweet. Children, once carefree as they played in their yards, now hesitated, glancing over their shoulders as they ventured outside. Adults clutched cups of coffee, nervously exchanging theories about the monsters that lurked beneath the surface of their quiet world. The sense of vulnerability had infiltrated every household, breeding speculation and fear. Yet among the apprehension, a few rallied to honor Marjorie. In the days following her death, community members initiated a memorial at the school, intending to celebrate the life of a woman who had devoted herself to shaping young minds. But beneath the initial sorrow, there was a deep-seated realization. Starting to grow, this tragedy might lead to revelations that would forever alter the fabric of their lives. As they sought answers, the investigation churned forward, gathering momentum like rolling thunder, and they would not stop until justice was served. Chapter 5. The Dead Ends. Days turned into weeks as the investigation into Marjorie Calloway's death spread into the heart of Maplewood. Yet as the school children returned to class and the sun punctuated the morning sky, it became increasingly clear that clarity was far from reach. Detectives Richards and Morgan found themselves entangled in a web of leads and false hopes. Each corner turned, revealing only more obstacles. The canvassing continued at full tilt, yet the elusive figure noted by witnesses remained absent from all reports. Each inquiry into local garages, backyard sheds, and nearby homes yielded nothing. They scrutinized any sign that might have indicated someone local was acting suspiciously. But the townsfolk remained largely supportive in an unyielding front of solidarity against the threat that had invaded their peaceful existence. Then came the calls. The tip line rang with anecdotal stories, hysterical claims from self-proclaimed psychics, and even those who wanted to share their dreams. It became disheartening to chase down each avenue, only to find a dead end. Fresh theories flooded in, rumors linking Marjorie to a mysterious secret admirer, others insinuating an affair gone awry, but none had any substantiation. As frustration grew, the detectives turned their attention to the digital breadcrumbs left behind. Marjorie had maintained a public social media presence, posting updates about her teaching and sharing snippets of her life. They dug into her messages, hoping to find a clue, a hint of threat, or an uncomfortable exchange. But none surfaced. Her online interactions painted a picture of a gentle soul, with only innocent interactions and encouraging posts. Eager to summon new leads, Richards and Morgan re-interviewed Marjorie's friends and colleagues. Most were still reeling from the loss, unable to comprehend the tragedy. Only a handful revealed curious tidbits. A recent argument with the school principal over budget cuts, and a peculiar encounter with a disgruntled parent about a failing student. As each lead evaporated like mist in the sunlight, doubts began to gnaw at the detectives. Were they missing something notable? Or worse, what if they were looking in the wrong places entirely? A once vibrant community was now a tapestry of conspiracy and despair, and the hunt for Marjorie's killer continued to loom large over Maplewood, casting long shadows in an unrelenting grip. Chapter 6. A break in the case. Just as the scent of autumn began to tinge the air, signaling the passage of time with no resolution, a flicker of hope appeared on the horizon. It came on a cool Thursday morning when Detective Morgan received a call from an unexpected source, a local journalist, who had been investigating Marjorie's death from a different angle. Over the weeks, she had dug deep into the social dynamics of the town, unearthing connections that had evaded the attention of law enforcement. "There's something you've got to see," she insisted, urgency permeating her tone. "I've been looking into Marjorie's relationships, but I stumbled onto something else: previous incidents and complaints connected to local parents. Some seemed bizarre." Intrigued, Morgan arranged to meet the journalist at a nearby coffee shop where investigative discussions over steaming cups had become a signed ritual. They pored over notes as she detailed troubling patterns involving a small group of parents whose actions had raised eyebrows among teachers. Among them was Timothy Hart, a man who had felt the sting of persistence as his son struggled academically in Marjorie's class. It seems he had an ongoing issue with how Marjorie handled his son's performance, the journalist explained. There were multiple complaints filed against her that went unpublicized, and while they were dismissed, he continued to voice his discontent to anyone who would listen. By the end of their conversation, Morgan felt the rush of adrenaline. They had an avenue to pursue, one that led into a murky world of parental expectations and frustrations that could easily spiral into something darker. With a renewed sense of urgency, Morgan briefed Richards on the findings. They immediately began digging into Timothy Hart's background, seeking unexplored connections and digging through police records to uncover any incidents involving him. A series of surprising revelations followed. Hart had been connected to an altercation years earlier involving another disgruntled teacher, unrelated but damning. Weeks after Marjorie's death, a rotten thread began to unravel, entwining self-interest and rage into a potentially fatal combination. It became evident that Hart wasn't simply a troubled parent. He was a man embittered by failure, feeling helpless and angry in the face of his circumstance. Yet even as the pieces began to fit, questions still loomed. Would this lead to Marjorie's murderer? Or was it merely a distraction? As the morning sun crested the horizon, detectives steeled themselves, knowing their next steps could pave the pathway to either resolution or complication in their search for justice. Chapter 7. The suspect. With a sense of cautious resolve, Detectives Richards and Morgan drilled deeper into Timothy Hart's life. The more they uncovered, the more they felt a chilling connection forming between Hart and the tragic end of Marjorie Calloway. A quiet man by nature, Hart had grown increasingly agitated following repeated meetings with school staff regarding his son's struggles. Parents often took pride in the achievements of their children and innate desire to safeguard their future, but in Timothy's case, pride warped into obsession. The next step involved an unannounced visit to Timothy's home, a modest two-story residence that radiated an oppressive stillness. Much like the man himself, despite its ordinary appearance, something about the place felt off, as if it were holding secrets within its walls. As they approached, the detectives exchanged a glance, both determined to confront the man whose hidden emotions might have driven him to such violence. Inside, they found a carefully curated chaos. Framed photos scattered across the walls, displaying a once smiling family. Yet it was evident that the home's atmosphere felt heavier, punctuated by the muted effects of an emotional storm brewing within. As they introduced themselves, Timothy's demeanor shifted, his body rigid and eyes narrow. The initial questions were innocuous, probing into his behavior around the time of Marjorie's death. Hart's answers were evasive, his gaze darting towards the floor, and an unusual sweat glistened on his brow. The detectives casually observed his body language, noting defensive gestures and the way his fingers clenched a nearby table, as if seeking solace from the pressure of confrontation. "Were you aware of any threats towards Miss Calloway?" Richards asked, keeping the tone neutral, observing the creeping fear behind Hart's facade. "Threats? No. I might have disagreed with her pedagogical approach," but he paused, voice wavering. "I would never resort to such action." "What kind of man do you think I am?" The detectives exchanged glances. Instinctively recognizing this was far from the common grievance of a frustrated parent. Hart's agitation was palpable, and with every twitch, the room thickened with tension. They reminded him of the witnesses who had spotted a man fitting his description near the park the night Marjorie died, noting his unusual absence from the community memorial. As Hart's composure wavered further, Morgan pressed for clarity, pushing against Hart's tightly bound emotional armor. Would his anger at Marjorie's professional decisions have pushed him to violence? The meeting ended with an air of unfinished business, and as they exited, Richards felt the gnawing conviction that the walls were beginning to close in on Timothy Hart. The case had shifted. He was no longer merely a frustrated father. He was morphing into the primary suspect, a shadow lurking ever closer to being exposed, defined by desperation and bitterness. The hunt for answers, once a trajectory of possibilities, had taken a defined turn. The detectives just needed to gather enough evidence to remove the layers of doubt surrounding him. Chapter 8. The trial, months after the chaotic investigation, became a distant memory for some. The small courthouse in Maplewood buzzed with anticipation. The once peaceful community had been forced to reckon with its darkest secrets. Marjorie Calloway's murder would not only demand justice, but would expose the fragility of their idyllic life. As courtroom doors swung open, the air thick with tension, the townspeople filled the dusty benches, eager to witness the proceedings against Timothy Hart. Dressed in a crisp suit that felt out of place against his troubled demeanor, Timothy sat with a resolute expression, yet his eyes flickered with uncertainty. The prosecution, led by an impassioned attorney, dissected the evidence that had built a compelling case against him. Witness statements formed a tapestry of shadows that linked him to Marjorie's tragic fate. From his open dissent at school meetings to the pointed grievances documented against her. The courtroom murmured as the prosecuting attorney detailed the frantic events of the evening of April 12th. They presented security footage from the park a mere 2 blocks from Marjorie's home, showing a man resembling Hart loitering near the area just prior to her death. A gathering of parents watched on, their hands clenched, knowing that the implications reached beyond court decisions into the fabric of their community. But it wasn't just evidence that rode the air. Emotions surged like wildfire. One by one, witnesses began to recount their interactions with Marjorie, painting her not just as a victim, but as a cherished figure whose loss cut deep into the heart of Maplewood. Even in the face of harsh testimony, the sadness surrounding her absence felt palpable and real. Hart's defense attorney argued fiercely, suggesting that the circumstantial evidence was weak and riddled with assumptions built on fear rather than fact. Who truly believes an innocent father would resort to such violence? She questioned, inviting doubt into the minds of those eager for justice. Yet as the trial continued, the prosecution unleashed potent psychological evaluations that peeled back the layers of frustration and resentment Hart had harbored over time. Marjorie, they argued, wasn't merely a teacher in his eyes. She had become a focal point of his bitterness, a conduit for everything that had gone wrong in his life. As testimony culminated, Morgan and Richard sat quietly in the back, listening to the handcrafted narrative emerge, a story not just of Marjorie's murder, but of a community's shared pain and unresolved grief. What? As the state rested its case, a quiet intensity underscored every glance exchanged in that tense courtroom. Maplewood had come together to seek answers, each face etched with anticipation. Would justice be served? As deliberation loomed, the town held its breath, a fragile thread binding them to the hope that their reckoning would restore peace and perhaps, in time, allow for healing. Chapter 9. The Aftermath. The day of reckoning finally arrived. As the gavel struck to announce the verdict, a collective breath was held, an entire community suspended in uncertainty. The jury had deliberated for hours, wrestling with their conscious resolve and the weight of a town's grief. When the words guilty rang out, the air shattered with emotion. Timothy Hart, once a mere figure of parental discontent, was now a symbol of all that had gone haywire in Maplewood. Gasps echoed within the courtroom as his world collapsed around him. Emotion cascaded over those who filled the benches, the overwhelming relief mingled with fresh waves of sorrow spilling into the seams of their surroundings. In the weeks following the trial, the community sought to reclaim their sense of stability. Marjorie's memory became interwoven into the very essence of Maplewood. The local school, renamed in her honor, became a gathering place for memorial events, scholarship fundraisers, and open dialogues on emotional health and parental involvement in education. They were determined to ensure that her legacy wasn't defined solely by tragedy, but by the love she had poured into shaping the lives of her students. But the scars of the incident lingered. Neighbors who once shared good mornings exchanged wary glances instead, haunted by the realization that evil dwelled quietly, even amidst their cozy facades. Churches held community gatherings, aimed at healing the fractures caused by the violence, a pathway to reconcile the sorrow that life had abruptly thrust upon them. Detective Morgan, fueled by the intense post-case momentum, reached out to fellow officers and community leaders to advocate for forensic training and intervention programs, specially designed for educators. "We must protect those who encourage our children to think beyond borders," she implored during a community meeting. Her voice, once a thread in the investigation, now resonated as a call to arms, summoning resources to ensure no child would feel abandoned amidst their educational struggles again. As fall yielded to winter and the chill swept through Maplewood, it did so without the piercing, unsettling shadow of unresolved murder. The world kept turning. Children laughed again, and the sweet aroma of cinnamon and baked goods wafted through the air once more. Marjorie's garden bloomed, tended by her devoted friends, filled with brightly colored flowers and fond memories. Yet, deep down in the hearts and minds of the townsfolk, a quiet resolve remained, a determination to carry on. They understood that healing would take time, but the commitment to revisit her teachings echoed louder than any lingering fear. In her spirit, Maplewood would continue to thrive, dedicated to ensuring that kindness and compassion illuminated their path forward. Refusing to permit darkness to linger any longer. Chapter 10. Reflection. Months turned into years, and Maplewood slowly began to reclaim its rhythm. The town was an evolving tapestry of grief and resilience, a delicate balance woven together with shared stories of Marjorie Calloway. The annual community gatherings morphed into vibrant festivals, celebrating not just her life, but the very essence of togetherness that she had embodied. Detective Morgan often walked through the schoolyard, where laughter echoed joyfully among the children she had once feared would lose their innocence. She felt the gentle tug of purpose in her heart as she observed teachers fostering creativity and nurturing curiosity, just as Marjorie had done. The landscape had irrevocably changed, but so had the people within it. In the quiet moments, she reflected on the nature of good and evil, and how a single act could destabilize a sanctuary, unleashing a trickle of darkness that had once been alien to the community. The loss of Marjorie would always ache, but her spirit thrived within the hearts of everyone she had touched. Each blossom in the garden set aside for her was a reminder that love remained a formidable force, capable of driving away despair. The lessons from this tragedy reach beyond the personal. They urge change, understanding, and an unwavering resolve to advocate for kindness and, perhaps above all, illuminate the innate beauty of humanity. As Morgan continued her work in the community and the police force, she clutched the lesson close. Amid shadows, one could always find light by nurturing compassion and connection. In embracing the truth of what happened, they could ensure that the hope of Maplewood never faded, becoming a sanctuary once more, a place where kindness would always reign.